Hello and welcome to the Baby Loss Podcast with me, Gabriella Austin. This podcast is for bereaved parents like myself to share their story around baby loss and miscarriage. In today's episode, Paula tells the story of her son Tadhg, who was sadly stillborn at 37 weeks. Tadhg's death was quite high profile in Ireland, and the link to his article will be posted in this episode. Many of my new friends I met through a charity called SANS, which is the stillbirth and neonatal death charity. Baby loss is unfortunately more common than people think, and certainly more common than discussed. Whilst I would like to raise awareness around this taboo subject, my main aim is to provide parents with a safe place to talk about their babies, wherever they may be in their journey. There is no judgment here, and every journey is different. Welcome to the second series, where we continue to tell the stories of our babies gone too soon. Trigger warning for this episode: discussion on baby loss, miscarriage, living children, COVID-19, medical negligence, and contains explicit content. Okay, cool. So, when you're ready, please start talking about Tadhg.
Okay. Tadhg is he's my third child. As I say, the trigger warning at the start that I am the other children. Not to go into too much detail from previous stuff, but myself and my husband, we met in 1999. We got married in 2007. And straight away I knew I wanted to start a family and I wanted to have a big family. But that wasn't going to be the case. And we tried and tried and tried, and nothing was happening. We went to various different doctors to get investigations done, and we were told that we probably wouldn't have children, that we needed to go the fertility route. So we did a couple of rounds of IUI that failed, and we not saying we came into money, I suppose, but his mother passed away, so we obviously inherited a bit of money, and it was very much okay. This is it. It's the last shot. We can't afford, because over here in Ireland you have to pay for fertility treatment. It's not, or at least at the time, it certainly wasn't covered under any sort of public healthcare system. So it was quite expensive, and we did just kind of one round of IVF, and we were blessed to have twin girls. So they arrived in 2014. Everything was grand, and we thought, okay. And around 2015, we said, will we try and see, will anything happen naturally? Because we obviously couldn't afford to be doing anything else. And we just said, look, sure, let's give it a go and see. Not really expecting anything to happen, and certainly not expecting that to happen so soon. So in 2015, we started trying for a baby, and lo and behold, little Tadhg was conceived very quickly and naturally, which was brilliant. And obviously we were delighted, and the pregnancy was, for the most part, it was fine, just the usual kind of morning sicknesses and all that sort of stuff. But like, we were just so excited. At about 19 weeks, I had an appointment with the doctor, and I found out then that it was a boy. So we were obviously over the moon. And don't get me wrong, obviously we wouldn't have cared whether it was a girl or a boy, but kind of, we already had twin little girls. So we thought, oh, here's a little boy, and it'll complete the family and everything's great. And we actually picked his name there and then. We were like, kind of humming and hawing, and we said no. My husband actually said to me, what about Tadhg? And I was like, yeah, I really like that. So from that early on, we knew that he was Tadhg. And again, as I say, like, everything was grand. Like, there was nothing of major concerns until I got to 33 weeks pregnant. And at that point, I started having reduced movements. And I attended my local hospital and told them reduced movements, for a couple of hours or whatever. It just didn't feel right to me. And I went in. Obviously, he started moving straight away, which is kind of typical, that you tell them there's something wrong, and then when you turn up at the hospital, everything's fine. And you're like feeling stupid, thinking, God, why did I come all the way in here for nothing? They kept me in overnight just to be on the safe side, and they sent me for a scan the next day. And it was at this scan that the sonographer thought she saw something that was concerning, with the placenta and the blood flow from the placenta. They called it absent end diastolic flow, where the blood just wasn't 100%. So it wasn't all the time, but it was just different times they thought, okay, it's not looking right. So again, we were told, give me the steroids. I was being told I was staying in hospital until Tadhg was born. So in my head, I was thinking, okay, it's probably going to be 7 weeks at the longest, because I'm 33 weeks now. They keep me till full term. I'm here for 7 weeks. So it wasn't the end of the world, but obviously I didn't want to be in hospital for 7 weeks. But because my twins had been premature, we kind of thought to ourselves, okay, well, we can do this if he comes early. We've had premature twins. We know what to expect. We were also told at this time that he was roughly 2.5 kilos in weight. So again, we thought, well, that's a decent enough weight size. I think it's about 5 pound.
Okay.
So we were like, that's a decent weight. So, we'll be happy enough with that. He should be okay. And this was on a Monday. And I was sent for a second scan on the Wednesday, just to check the blood flow. And everything seemed to be fine. So I went from being, you're not going home without a baby, let's do steroids, let's keep you literally under 24-hour security, to off you go home now, everything's fine. And I didn't quite understand why it was like so serious, and then all of a sudden I'm being told, no, go home. But I went home, okay, whatever. I said, sure, the doctors know what they're doing. And that was on the Thursday, and the following Sunday, like literally 3 days later or whatever, I was back in the hospital again saying, look, the movements aren't right. I'm just not happy with them. Can you check me again? And again, I was kept in because being a Sunday, the radiography department doesn't open. So they wanted to just get me scanned the next morning. They didn't find anything on the scan. So they thought, okay, everything's fine. And they sent me home, with the view to come back to the hospital the following week just for a clinic appointment to have a scan and to have a CTG trace thing done. And of course, at this stage, I was made feel, I don't want to say I was made feel stupid, but you're just kind of, they'll ask you, like, you're not having movements. And they had said to me, well, how many movements have you had? And like, I think I had said something like I'd had 7 movements, over whatever number of hours. And they laughed at me because I had one doctor telling me I need to have 10 movements in 24 hours. Okay. And then I had someone tell me that it's 10 movements within 2 hours. And then someone else was saying, oh, it's 10 movements. I can't remember what they were saying. And then a third doctor had said to me, oh, well, baby moves different every day of the week. You move different every day of the week. So I didn't really know what I was supposed to be feeling. And it was only when I said to a midwife, I said, look, if I have my 10 movements at, 1 o'clock in the morning, between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the morning, I have 10 good movements, but I feel nothing for the rest of the day. Yeah. I'm still within that 24-hour period. So should I be like, oh, sure, it's grand. I'm still within my 24-hour window. And at that point, then she said to me, it's what's right for you. So if there's a change in the pattern, that's when you become concerned. And I was like, thank you. Finally, somebody who gets it, that, what I'm feeling is not my normal. So when I come in here and say I've reduced movements, whether it's 10 movements or 2 movements, it's different to what it had normally been. So please listen to me. But of course, they didn't really listen to me, and I was dismissed and sent home. And I went home. I went back into hospital on, it was the 18th of May, for just my checkup. And it was a CTG that I was getting that day. And then I was meant to go and get a scan done. But the doctor at the time gave me the CTG, very rudely dismissed me. Very rudely, like he, with his hand, very rudely dismissed me. And sent me home without me getting a scan done, without me seeing the consultant, and told me to come back in 2 weeks. So I left the hospital I was quite upset. I was angry and I was annoyed because I was just made feel so stupid that, here's this pregnant, emotional woman who's coming in here, and there's nothing wrong with her, and you're wasting time and you're wasting resources. Go away. So I went home, and anyway, and I went back into the hospital on the 2nd of June for a I think it was maybe no, it was, I think it was the 1st of June was the Wednesday for just my normal routine antenatal appointment. And so this would have been kind of 2 weeks with no monitoring, no nothing. Went back in at 37 weeks for just the normal kind of antenatal appointment, and I'd seen the same doctor who had dismissed me. And I tried to ask him, okay, how big is this baby? Because I'm now 37 weeks. I'm hoping to deliver him naturally. And I kind of want to know, is it 6 pounds? Is it 8 pounds? Because there's a big difference when you're having to push that out down there in this little tiny hole or whatever. Like, it mightn't seem big, but it's big. And he wouldn't answer me. He kind of shouted at me and was like, we don't do that. And kind of started giving out to me again. And I just was like, okay, well, if you're going to start shouting at me, I'm just not going to ask you anything because, again, yes, I am emotional and I'm hormonal and I just don't really need somebody screaming and shouting at me. But I wasn't happy, and I wasn't happy with the scan, but I was too afraid to say anything. I didn't think the heartbeat was very strong on the scan when I'd seen it. And I can still see myself lying there and looking at the heartbeat and saying, like, it doesn't look right, it doesn't look strong enough. And I knew my consultant was in the next room, and I was looking at the door kind of saying, like, the guy in there will know exactly if this is correct and if this is right. Why can't you just go and ask him? But I never said any of this out loud. And I have said it, like, I've obviously had to live with the guilt of never asking for a second opinion or never insisting that guy like come in to me. And I was sent home and told to come back in 2 weeks' time, when I would have been 39 weeks, and they may, kind of induce labour or whatever at that stage. So off I went home and kind of went right. And on the Friday night at about 6 o'clock, on the Thursday night into the Friday morning at about 1:30 in the morning, I got this really bad cramp. And it kind of floored me for just like a minute, but I didn't have any bleeding, I didn't have any waters break or nothing. So I kind of thought maybe it's just, I'd never gotten this far in pregnancy, so I thought maybe it's just him moving into the birth canal and moving down, and he was pushing things out of his way or something, like so.
Yeah.
And because I didn't have any bleeding, I thought I'm sure everything's fine. So I didn't go to the hospital or nothing, didn't ring them. I thought, no, I'm sure I'm fine. And the next evening, about 6 o'clock, I actually went into labour. I believed myself that he was moving because my contractions were quite close together. I didn't know they were contractions at this time. Like, they were painful, but again, I'd been told in the hospital that if I was in labour, I couldn't hold a conversation. Okay. And yet I was able to talk free, and I was able to, like, I bathed my other children that night, and I was able to, like, bath them, and I kind of thought, this isn't labour, like, because surely if it was, I couldn't do any of this stuff. And so I left it, and I think about 9:30 that night, I rang the hospital because I was concerned I'd had a C-section with the previous labour, so I was more concerned about the scar than anything else, and in case it ruptured. And they said to me, it could just be Braxton Hicks, have a rest, see how you feel, and if you're concerned, come back in, whatever. My husband was on night duty, so he wasn't at home. And he came home about 4 o'clock on the Saturday morning. I'm still getting these pains, so I rang the hospital, and it was decided I should go in. So I drove myself in. Like, the hospital was about a 15-minute drive from the house, so it was like quite close. And I think it was about 6 o'clock in the morning, I drove myself into the hospital, and said, look, it's grand, there's not going to be any traffic on the road or nothing, and it'll be fine. And if I am in labour, sure, it's not as if it's going to happen within 20 minutes. The husband will have time to, organise childminders and get into me. And I remember going in, and I was like, not, yourself, like, you're happy and you're excited, because I was anxious. Yeah. I didn't know what was going to, I didn't expect, because I hadn't had labour before. But it was also that whole, like, oh God, am I going to get to meet him? Is this it? Like, and I was brought down to the labour ward. And I can't remember the nurse's name, but I can still see her, like, kind of trying to listen with the Doppler for where he was in his heartbeat, and she couldn't find it. And we kind of made a little joke saying, oh, he's playing tricks, he's hiding, whatever. And then she tried with the CTG monitor, and she couldn't locate it either. And I could see the concern on her face, but I didn't want to believe it. I was kind of like, no, he's messing, and she's going to pick it up. It's just the machines. And then at that point, she got the senior midwife and the registrar came in. And again, they were trying to find the heartbeat, and they couldn't. I asked at that point, I said, like, will I get my husband? And they told me to wait. They said, no, hold off and wait another minute. And they brought in a portable ultrasound machine. And as soon as they scanned, now obviously I'm no expert, but having had that many scans, kind of both with previous pregnancy and this one, I knew roughly what I was looking at. And as clear as day, I could see that there was obviously no heartbeat. So at that point they said, we need to ring the consultant on call, and I think you need to get your husband. And so I rang, obviously I think I texted my husband because I couldn't get through to him on the phone, saying, you need to get here now, they can't find a heartbeat. And I rang a neighbour to kind of come around, and between my husband driving up to the hospital, like as I say, it's a 15-minute drive, but he probably did it in 5 because
yeah,
he was like, but I know he abandoned the car just kind of like outside the hospital, not even parked. He literally just stopped in the car park somewhere, like and ran in. But between him coming up to me and the consultant coming in from say on call, they brought me down to what they call the early pregnancy unit, and they have like the big proper scan machines there. And I can remember the consultant coming in, scanning me, and they wouldn't wait for my husband. I kept saying to them, like, he's literally just parking the car. He's like 2 minutes up the stairs. But they just scanned me anyway and said, they said, like, Leica volume was normal. They thought the size looked normal. And with that, he said, sorry, no movement, baby's gone. And I think at that point, there was a knock on the door then, and it was my husband to come in. And I was sitting up in the bed, and he walked in the door and he looked at me, and I just screamed at him, he's gone. And then this noise came out of my mouth. I don't even know what it was.
Howl.
I was
wailing.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So I remember saying to the doctor, like, it's nothing as stupid as this sounds, but he had told me that the bladder was still full. And I don't know whether, like, I'd obviously heard years ago that when like a person, as in like an adult, passes away, they do tend to like empty their bowel and their bladder as they pass away. So in my head, I thought, okay, well, he's not dead long because this is still full. So he's, he might be only just gone. And I was like, can you take him out and shock him back to life? Can we get the whatever defibrillator thing on him and bring him back to life? And like, they're all just standing there looking at me. I know that in their head, they're just like, their heart is breaking because, they don't know what to say. And they're looking at me going, God love this poor woman because she's absolutely crazy. We can't do this. But what she's saying in her head is making perfect sense to her. And how do we tell her that, no, there isn't anything that we can do, that her son is dead? Given the fact that like 2 days previously, I'd been in the hospital and been told he was fine. So, obviously it was such a massive shock. So they kind of like obviously left us or whatever, and we went back to the labour ward, and they told me I could have a section there and then. It was a bank holiday weekend, which was not ideal because obviously the hospital was on a skeleton staff, and obviously just being a bank holiday, like, so they said you can either have a section now on the Saturday morning there and then, or you can go home, see how things progress, and if nothing happens by Monday, ring us and we'll do a section on the Tuesday morning. And at the time I said to them that I wasn't ready to say goodbye to him. So I said, I'll go home and I'll sit like this, kind of, it's not as if it's going to do much. Nothing's going to happen, like nothing's, bad is going to happen. And anyway, like it can't get much worse as far as I'm concerned. No. So I went home I think it was about 9 o'clock in the morning at this stage. And like, even at that, I can remember like walking around the house literally like a zombie. Like I was just randomly walking from room to room, um, and didn't really know what I was saying, didn't know what I was doing, just walking around. My husband, I had said to him, look, go to work because, there's nothing that you can do. You might as well go to work. He's self-employed. So I thought, if you don't go to work, you don't get paid. If you don't get paid, we don't obviously pay the bills. So, go to work. And, I have my sister here. If anything happens, she can get me to the hospital and we'll ring you and all that stuff. Um, but then I think within 3 hours, as he was packing the car to go to work and packing us all up to go to my sister's house, the pains were getting closer and kind of more intense. And she herself has children and had laboured, so she recognised the signs and said, I think this is getting a little bit worse, so maybe you should ring them again. And I ended up going back in, and at that point, they said to me, yeah, we're going to keep you here because you're actually now in labour. I was only about 2 centimetres, but they said, look, there's no point in sending you home, it's fine. And not that it's funny is the wrong word to use. The doctor that had dismissed me previously, those kind of couple of times or whatever, he actually was the doctor that came in to confirm that I was in labour. Knowing that obviously this was a woman who was going to give birth to a stillborn. And he looked at me and said, did I see you in clinic during the week? And I just looked him dead in the eye and said, yeah. I said, I was in here on Wednesday and you told me everything was fine. And here I am 2 days later, my baby's dead. And I suppose, not saying as cold as he is, but he literally just, checked my cervix and said, yeah, she's 2 centimetres, and walked out the door. There was no, I'm sorry. There was no, oh dear Lord, what in God's name have I potentially missed? There was nothing. And from that day to this, I've never been given the opportunity to sit down and talk to him. The hospital would never let me question him, would never let me talk to him. But, I get all the red tape away. So I literally just sat in a room on my own, and waited for the labour to progress. It was not slow enough, but I don't know whether it was slow, whether it was fast, it was whatever, like my first labour. I remember kind of about 6 o'clock, I asked them for paracetamol because the pain was getting a bit more. And at that point, the nurses said, take the epidural. We know you wanted a natural labour. We know you wanted everything, kind of music and happy
bells.
holistics. But she's like, yeah, she's like, you're not going to get a happy ending. So there is no point in going through excruciating pain for the pain that you're going to feel afterwards. So take the epidural. So I eventually took the epidural and was in the labour ward then for the rest of the night. And I think it was about 12 o'clock they told me I was fully dilated. So this would have been kind of midnight into the Sunday morning. And I was told, you're fully dilated now, but we're just going to give it another hour just to kind of make sure everything's in place. And then you'll be able to start pushing. And they came back into me about 1 o'clock, and my temperature had actually spiked. So there was concerns for sepsis, and there was tests everywhere and antibiotics and everything was going mad. And I didn't care as long as I could push, because I said, I'm not after going through all this now for you to tell me I need a section. And I think it was about 20 to 2 in the morning, I started pushing, and 17 minutes past 2, he was born. And he was perfect.
Yeah.
Absolutely perfect in every way.
Your beautiful baby boy.
Yes.
Yeah.
He just looked like he was asleep. And I was like, I remember, again, this is me being I say stupid. And I don't even want to say normal people. Non-bereaved people would think, oh God, he's crazy. It's normal to us.
Yeah.
I remember thinking to myself, will I start breastfeeding him because like breast milk is magic and that might bring him back to life? But at the same time in my head, I'm going, do not start trying to breastfeed him because they will literally sign you into the psychiatric ward. and think you're gone completely doolally, like. So,
Yeah.
just try and stay
Mm.
whatever amount of space you can stay in the reality of it.
Yes.
Um, and the nurses now are fantastic, the two nurses that delivered him, and like they took loads of photographs with me, photographs with my husband, photographs of him kind of laid out, so we were able to see kind of like the full length of him and everything.
Yeah.
Because I was, after they dressed him, I was afraid then to undress him in case I'd break anything, because skin slippage or anything like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really want to look at him outside of his clothes, but they took photographs for us to be able to see
Yeah.
him perfect, as I say. Um, yeah. So then it was just a case of I went back to the um, maternity ward itself. And in one hand, I know that they did their best for me. They put me it was a 3-bed ward, but they obviously gave me that room
Mm-hmm.
privately on my own, so that if my husband wanted to sleep, there was a bed for him to sleep in, and obviously there was room. They told me there was no restrictions on visitors. I could have as many people, whatever time I wanted, to be able to come up and be with me. So like in that sense, it was nice, but at the same time, where the ward was literally next door to a 6-bed ward with
Yeah.
crying babies, and
Mm-hmm.
you would see people walk up and down pushing the little cots with their babies.
Mm-hmm.
I think at one point somebody said to my husband in the elevator or waiting at the elevator, like, oh, kind of, what did you have? And he just said to them, I had a little boy, because he
Yeah.
didn't want to take away from them. But I think he saw them then outside the hospital later, and they asked again, and he at that point said to them, well, unfortunately our son didn't make it.
Mm.
And you could, like, the guy's face dropped, and he
Yeah.
didn't know what to say. But like my husband was like, look, it's fine, like, not going on, these things happen, but he's like, I'm not going to take away your joy because we didn't get ours. But it was very hard to have to sit, in that room and hear all these babies around you, and you're kind of going, why
Yeah.
didn't my baby get this treatment, and
Mm-hmm.
why isn't he here? Why me? Like, and you don't wish it on anyone, um, but at the same time, it is very much like, well, why did that person get, the full standard of care, and I didn't?
Yeah.
Why did I have to go off today? Like, um, but yeah, so I think you guys have SANS in the UK,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and we've a charity over here called Féileacán, which is a Gaelic word for butterfly.
Okay.
Um, and it's very similar to SANS. I think they would have been like the Irish SANS, and then they kind of changed, or they, kind of whatever, merged with someone. But they would do the memory boxes and the cuddle cots, similar to what SANS would do. So thankfully I had the cuddle cot.
Mm-hmm.
So this was obviously Sunday morning, and I got to spend Sunday, Monday. Um, we agreed to have an autopsy, so he went for an autopsy on the Tuesday, and we got him back on the Wednesday, and had the Wednesday night with him,
Oh my God.
in the hospital. And then on the Thursday morning, he was buried. We had his funeral on the Thursday. So with the cuddle cot, we were able to get obviously the few days to be able to, like, take photographs and cuddle him and
Mm-hmm.
spend a bit of time. So yeah.
Oh, I wish. Yeah, I wish we'd had a cuddle cot. And to say that, okay, I'm going to say it, but you were really lucky that you had those couple of days with him with that cuddle cot. Oh my gosh. Mm.
Because I do know how blessed we were to be able to have that experience and have the cuddle cot to,
So lovely.
like, I know that just to take the photographs, and just, as I say, like, it's the same photograph pretty much like 100 times,
Mm.
but still, like, to be able to take them photographs, like, and like that, I was able to kind of, pick them up and then put them back down when, I wanted to, or I needed to. Um, it also meant that, any family that I had that wanted to come and see him and say goodbye or whatever, they were given that opportunity. So like we do know that we were very lucky to be able to avail of it, like and I suppose it is thanks to these charities that do it. Like there was a doctor who had only recently started in the hospital, a trainee doctor, um, and she had actually come from America, and she'd never heard of a cuddle cot. So, not saying that they're not over there like they are in America. I've made like a good few mum friends who've obviously travelled this road as well. But they just mustn't be something that is as um, prominent in the hospitals in America as they are in Ireland and the UK. Like,
Yeah.
I know, I think Isabella was it Spain or
Say that again, sorry.
where was Isabella born?
No, she was
Where was
born in the
Isabella
UK.
born?
In
Was
the
she in
UK.
Spain? Oh, in the UK. Sorry,
Yeah.
apologies for that.
No, it's fine.
Um,
So one of my
okay.
guests, she had her son in Cyprus. But no,
Oh,
yeah,
that
no,
must be.
yeah. But Isabella was born here.
Yeah,
Yeah, but so we had one night with her, but we didn't have a cuddle cot or a cold cot. So they said to me, it's going to be best if we take her away. Obviously, I knew where she was going, but she said, we'll take her away. And then
yeah,
when you wake up in the morning, um, she can come back to you. But she looked completely different when she came back. It's pictures of two different babies. But I
yeah,
think,
yeah,
uh, don't think that if she had stayed with us the night, not in the cuddle cot, just in my pajama top, that's just sort of like where she sat the whole time we had her, um, she would have changed a lot quicker, and
yeah,
they may have said to me, or maybe it's time we take her for good, sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? But
yeah,
because we because she had that time away where she was cool and then came back in the morning, it was our decision to say goodbye and leave in the end, instead of them having to sort of like maybe like, yeah, intervene and say, well, we think it might be time that,
when you weren't at least it's on
yeah.
your terms in that
Mm,
sense. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. We were
it's
in
still not easy.
no, we were in a sans room, which was a room just off the ward. um, and there's a double bed and a sofa bed and an ensuite, and a TV and stuff like that, and pictures of butterflies on the wall. But it wasn't soundproof, so you can still hear the babies crying in there. You can't see them, but yeah, they were there. And from so when I arrived at the hospital, I went into one room, um, and there was a big pool in there and a big, you know, gym ball and all this sort of stuff in there, and the oxygen and a pull down bed, and clearly like a sort of a birthing suite. But when I was actually ready to push, they moved me, but they took me through where there were mothers into a different sort of like room to give birth. So, but because you need to be looked after by a midwife, and the midwives work on the ward with the babies, with the mothers that
Yeah,
have given birth, and there isn't a separate ward for babies that aren't going to make it, or babies that have already passed away to be born. We need to be looked after by the midwife, like the midwives. And so that's the ward that we're on, because that's the care that we need after we've given birth. So yeah, that's always probably one of the worst things about these stories, is when you hear mums and dads talking about how you're still, yeah, surrounded by living babies and happy parents, and
yeah.
your arms are empty and your heart's broken, and
And
you
like
feel
because
like you're completely
I
on your
can still
own.
hear. Yeah. When I was actually in the labour ward, there's four in the hospital that I had Tadhg in. There's um four wards that are like in the actual labour ward, and then there's what's known as the midwifery led unit for people who are not as high risk, and they're like the birthing suites, as you say, with the not quite the pool, but they'd have like obviously a bath for you, a big bath for you to sit in with your
Hmm.
partner and stuff like that. They don't encourage labour in the water, as in like pushing in the water. At that point, they get out, but it's they've a couple of labour suites and stuff. But we were in labour ward 4, and you could hear all the babies around you being born.
Hmm.
and you just knew. And I remember when Tadhg was born, like it was eerily silent. Now there was probably lots of noise around,
Mm-hmm.
but you just couldn't hear anything around you. It was just this silence. Um, I can still, even with the epidural, I can still feel the sensation of him being born. And at the time, my husband had his back to, say, my legs,
Mm-hmm.
because he had been warned, kind of, he's possibly passed away on Thursday night, so there might be discoloration, there might be a bit of skin slippage, and there could be damage. Um, so he wouldn't obviously do well. My husband wouldn't really do very well if there is kind of like, you know, blood or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, so he was afraid to look. And I remember when Ty was born, I obviously immediately looked down
Mm-hmm.
and went, "Oh God." And he went, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Nothing." I said,
Nothing.
"He's absolutely perfect." And I think that was obviously what shocked us, that we were like perfect babies don't die. So, but why is this baby dead? Like, um, and even that, like they thought the placenta looked fine and the cord looked fine. It wasn't wrapped around his neck, so there was no like clear cut, okay, this is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I suppose that's why we said, okay, we need to get an autopsy, just to rule out that there was something wrong that could put, my other children at risk, or any
Mm-hmm.
future generations at risk.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know whether you want me to go into that now or
Well, yeah, of course you
what.
can. I
Sorry.
just, um, no, of course, yeah, you can. Please talk about, yeah, whatever it is or whoever it is that you want to speak about. But, um, so for with my labour, um, she was so small, so my body just went into labour. I dilated very quickly, and she was born. Within sort of 3 hours of realising that I was in labour, got to the hospital, and obviously the contractions were getting a lot closer together, and my mum was saying to the midwives, the doctor, she's a lot further on along than you think she is, I think. My mum's like, I haven't looked and I'm not a midwife, but I just, it's happening quite quickly. And they examined me, and that's when they sort of like ushered me into the other room. um but Isabella was born in the sac, so my waters hadn't broken, and she was alive when she was born. But really similar thing, like, well, I thought she was going to look poorly. I didn't know, was she going to look like a baby? Like, what sort of, like, I didn't really know what to expect. And um, they they broke the sac while she was, so she was literally born. They broke the sac immediately and then put her onto, like, into the incubator cot thing, obviously just so the doctor could come in and see if how developed she was, and if they were going to resuscitate her if she stopped breathing. And they said, oh no, she's too poorly. So when she has a heartbeat now, but she when she stops breathing, we won't resuscitate her. um this is, just have this time with her. And I was like, just, he's like, yeah, just give her to me then. What, stop looking at her. I want to see her, because I still hadn't seen her, because they took her straight to the cot.
Yeah.
So I just remember thinking, yeah, come on. Yeah, you said she's not going to make it, so bring her to me
Yeah.
where she needs to be. I need to see what she looks like. And yeah, she just looked like a baby. I don't know what I was expecting.
Yeah.
She just looked like a tiny little, and she was really quite brown as well. She was really quite dark. So she just looked like this, yeah. And she was moving, and she was, and she was moving her hands around her face, and she scratched her nose, and she has a sort of like a scratch in the pictures that we've got of her. Yeah, just laying there, and just give her to me. That was just in my head. Pass her over. What are you doing? But we didn't know she was a girl. We didn't know we were having a girl. I was convinced she was a little boy, and I'd even picked out names for boys and everything. I was looking at boys, boys, boys. I'm definitely having a boy. Yeah. And then the doctor says, you've had a little girl. My dad went, a girl? My ex-husband goes, a girl? My mum's like, it's a girl. And I was like, I've got a girl. And
No,
then
it's not.
Then I want to see her even quicker because I can't believe it, because I was expecting this little bruiser to come out, but actually what had happened is this tiny little princess had come out instead. And I
You
just
did,
wanted to see
yeah.
her. I couldn't believe it. So, yeah.
Oh
But yeah,
God.
and I know
And do you mind?
yeah, no, ask away.
Sorry, because I obviously don't mean any offense, and I don't know how to word this properly, but I think that's for me. I often wonder, kind of not was it easier for us because he died inside me. I don't know whether I could have managed if he'd lived and then died. But then, like, my husband will question, like, he got nothing, as in, he always, all he wanted was, the hand around the
Mm-hmm.
finger. Um, and that was his big thing, is like that he didn't get anything. He didn't get to necessarily bond with him when even I was pregnant, because, like, he wouldn't feel the kicks as much as I would or whatever. Um, and we've often kind of wondered, like, is it easier because he died before he was born, or would it have been harder on us if he lived for, an hour or 2 hours a day?
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose it's not that we're even trying to quantify a grief or say, like, my pain is worse than yours or anything like that. It's just trying to make sense of what we feel, going like, well, because I've often said, if Tadhg was meant to die, like, would it have been easier? Would I have accepted it if he died at 27 weeks as opposed to 37?
Mm-hmm.
Because at least I'm going, well, at 27, he would have been, like, less developed, and his lungs wouldn't have been anywhere near mature enough. So maybe I would have been like, okay, well, there was nothing they could do. But because it was 37, and because I knew that there was obviously, since the inquest, an awful lot more that they could have done,
Mm.
it's harder for me to accept it as such. So in terms of Isabella, like, you can't quantify how hard it was, but that's, I suppose, what I'm asking in a nutshell, is like, that time with her and then for her to pass. Like, I just don't know how I would never have been able to do that.
So because because I thought I was having a boy, and I thought that she was a boy the entire time I was pregnant, and I was even calling her. So I named the bump Wilbur. So I was having this little Wilbur, this little pig from Charlotte's Web, but still I loved it. Still, I love it now. You know, I don't know, just love the name, and my family were calling like her Wilbur, and it was just Wilbur, 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 that I felt I didn't actually have any time with her.
Yeah,
So what was actually nice was having just those sort of 30 minutes with her,
yeah,
where she was still moving and alive, because I'd had a lot of alive time with Wilbur and felt Wilbur move and spoke to Wilbur a lot. And, we had 3D scans of Wilbur. It was all Wilbur. And then, yeah, but I think maybe if she wasn't alive when she was born, I would have definitely felt, I already feel guilty that I wasn't having time with her, that I felt like I was having time with
yeah.
Wilbur, not with Isabella. So no, I'm so glad that she was alive and could hear me say, "No, your name's Isabella. I'm so sorry. I thought, like, Mummy thought you were a boy. I'm so sorry. You're clearly a girl. You're clearly, my princess." And yeah, no, and it was
Very.
hard. But then when you listen to, we listen to other parents' stories, I was actually looking back now. I can say this after 7 years. I I'm glad that she wasn't resuscitated and prodded and on a ventilator, and having drips into her little hands and her little legs, and I wasn't allowed to cuddle her, because the entire time she was alive in the world,
She
she was with
felt.
me.
Yeah.
Hmm. And not with somebody she didn't know. So she either stopped breathing in my arms, my mum, my dad, and my ex-husband. We were like, they were all there, and we just kept passing her around, because obviously we were aware that she is about to stop breathing. So um and she obviously, as like as the body starts to die, and you have like these impulses, like little flicks, or like your body parts sort of start to move around and stuff. She was moving quite a bit like that as well. So even though it was because she was passing. It was still nice to actually see her move, and she actually made my dad jump. My dad was like, "She's moving." It's like, oh yeah, she is, but that's as much as she's going to do. And but yeah, so we had a so when they took her off and they got her dressed, I actually just wanted to undress her again. So I was just like, no, stop covering her. I want to see what she looks like, because I needed to remember. I needed
Yeah.
to kiss every little part of that body. I kissed, all of it. And um, so my parents stayed there, and then sort of my obviously then mother-in-law came up to the hospital, and my dad laid Isabella on the bed, and the first thing he did was take all of her clothes off. He's like, look, he unwrapped her and took a little dress off and said, look, here she is. Because I don't know, I think everyone was just shocked that she just looked so normal. I don't know. It was, but yeah, everyone just needed to
Proud,
have
so
a
some
good look at
kind of,
her.
yeah.
Yeah. So, no, I'll be forever grateful for those minutes.
Few minutes, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like as I say, it's this thing that we've always wondered, and it's the $64 million question or whatever, and we'll obviously never get the answer to it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's obviously,
Oh,
I know Tadhg knows I love him, but I could say it till the cows come home. In my head, I'm saying he never heard me say it, because in my arms he was dead.
mm-hmm.
So I obviously have that kind of, not guilt. I don't know what it is. Obviously, it's a longing or something of, wanting to say, like, and tell him everything, like, you're beautiful and I love you, and, all
Mm-hmm.
the things you want to say. And, you know, it's not the same saying it to someone that's dead. And while I
Yeah.
know you are spiritual or anything, you believe like they're here with you and they can hear you all the time and all that stuff. And I do believe that, yes, but there's an element of me that's going, yeah, but that doesn't really matter because it's not the
Mm-hmm.
same.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But he did hear your voice from the moment he was conceived, like the whole time. He just spent all of that time with you. And I find I find sort of comfort and peace in that now. At the beginning, it wasn't like that. I was absolutely devastated. I didn't open my curtains for 6 months, But whereas now, I think, no, she made me a mum, and she's my only child, and she will be my only child forever. And yeah, I carried her, and she just and we shared that bond, like very very unique bond. It was just us. And she, if she's anything like me, she's just rolling her eyes the whole time, saying, "Stop fucking calling me Wilbur." The girl.
Girl, god damn
Yeah.
it.
Oh, bless her. Yeah. Gosh. I
Sorry.
think though, I don't know about you. I was speaking to my mum about this sort of quite recently, but I I'm starting to, so I do feel like Isabella is just with me all the time, literally just sitting here. But she's aging. So before, I was just always picturing she'll just be a baby forever, and she'll just be my baby, my baby. But when I see her now, I'm starting to sort of like picture this 7-year old. It's really bizarre. And when I'm upset now, like if I'm having a bad day where I'm just thinking about her, it feels like I've lost a 7-year old. It doesn't feel like I've lost my baby, because I just feel that she's with me all the time. It's just, yeah. I never thought, I was always at the support group saying, no, she's a baby. Oh, I'm never going to picture her like that. No, she's just going to be my little baby forever. But she's not. She's just sort of like, in my imagination, she's a girl now. She's a 7-year old. I don't know, a bit weird.
I just reminds me, they do say that again, if you're spiritual, and I know you could read up, and one thing will tell you, no, you don't age, other things will tell you do.
Uh-huh.
They do say that they do age. So I don't know. I've always, from the moment he passed away, he's always been a 2.5-year-old toddler.
Yeah.
And he's never gone beyond that, which is because he's 5, he should be 5.5 now. But he's always been a little 2.5-year-old toddler running around in a little check shirt and jeans. and I just can't get out of my head. That's probably what he'll be forever to me. Like
Uh-huh.
so.
Yeah. No,
Um,
that's
I
interesting.
don't picture him even as a baby, and I've never pictured him as a baby. Like that's just what he's been. So
I went through a phase of having some pretty vivid dreams, and I had them that were they were quite constant, but the dream I was having was that I was just breastfeeding her, and for months I just every time I went to sleep I was just having this dream that I was just breastfeeding her. It's just really bizarre. And then all of a sudden she's a 3-year old and now she's a 7-year old. Like, yeah, she's yeah. But I don't know whether
and I'm
it's
sure there is
I
something.
sorry, carry on. No, carry on.
I'm sure there is something in those dreams that if you were to go to, again, someone, I would be into mediums
Mm-hmm.
and again, like spiritual and like Reiki and stuff. Now, when I say I'm into it, like if somebody tells me, oh, this is going to happen, I don't wholeheartedly believe it. Like I do believe that we have to choose our own paths in order to help things along or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, but I would believe that, kind of dreams and stuff are a connection to the spirit world. So, kind of, I'm probably talking through my backside here now, saying like you dreaming of breastfeeding her is like, well, you are obviously, you're nurturing her and you're keeping her
Mm-hmm.
alive, you're keeping her
Yeah.
spirit alive, continue to talk about her every day and do your podcast and
Mm-hmm.
share her stories. Like she's, as cliche as it is, like she's never going to die, but like, you know, the more
No.
people that are like, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean.
Yeah.
I'm talking through. I am talking through my backside
No,
now.
no, not at all. And I think as well, um, so one of the reasons she's probably growing up is because I'd celebrate her birthday. Uh, she was lovely and warm and alive and gorgeous and made me a mother. And like I said, be the only child I have. So she is 7.
Yeah.
I buy I buy age appropriate gifts and take them to her grave. Like I don't buy a baby gift. I buy 7-year-old gifts, and I baked a cake for a 7-year-old. That's what I
Yeah.
was doing, and I put unicorns on it because 7-year-olds like unicorns. So Isabella was buried in a rainbow baby grow, which is where sort of like my obsession with rainbows comes from, because I didn't want her to be an angel. Yeah, I did see you drinking that earlier. I'm going to say something in a minute, but I won't interrupt your flow. Um, yeah, so I have rainbows everywhere and rainbow quotes,
Yeah.
chase rainbows, and all that sort of stuff. It says,
Mhm.
dance with fairies, ride a unicorn, swim with mermaids, and chase rainbows. Because I didn't want to. I don't know, maybe I didn't want her to be a baby forever because I didn't want her to be, again, this is just all, it was all me. This is how I feel. I didn't want her to be a dead baby. So I didn't want her in a gown. That was just, so I wanted her in a baby grow because she was a baby.
Yeah.
And I wasn't christening her. Oh no, I would have had her christened in, she would have been christened in the church that I was married in, but things change anyway. But and so yeah, and then it was nice to then think of her as a rainbow in the sky instead of an angel or something like that. So yeah, um, so yeah, she was a baby, and yeah, and she's just sort of growing up, but she's just in here in spirit. Like she's in
Yeah.
this room. I don't know, people can think what they like about that, but she's just she's just a part of my life all day. She's
Mm.
just always here. But maybe that's because I surround myself in rainbows. Like my tablecloth. Oh, I don't know if I'm going to get it high enough. Here's a
Oh,
rainbow.
yeah.
Everything's rainbow.
We're
This
very rainbow here as well. So
this is sort of like a snood that I wear on the motorbike. It's a rainbow. Yeah, so maybe that's why. I just feel like she's around me all the time. Do you have stuff like that as well? Yeah.
big into butterflies.
Yeah.
Because the Féileacáin charity over here, as I said, the word Féileacáin is the Gaelic word for butterfly. So they'd obviously associate butterflies. And so we'd like kind of obviously butterflies and robins. And then obviously we do like rainbows. I think every year, either on Tadhg's birthday or it might be say on my older children's birthday, there's always a rainbow.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was a couple of years ago, there was like the biggest rainbow went over the entire house. And it could have been there for a good 20 minutes. And I'm sure the neighbors now at this stage are used to me because even when I'm in, like, as I said, I only started work after being out of work for about 8 years. But the people in work now know that I'm crazy and I'd be sitting and I'll be looking at the window and
Yeah.
kind of go like, it's rainbow weather. There's going to be
Yes.
one. There's going to be one. And I'm like
That's
literally
exactly
looking
what I'm like.
in a rainbow and like mid conversations like, oh, there's a rainbow. I have to go and take a photograph of it.
Yeah.
Like my phone is just full of pictures of rainbows. Like
Me too. Full of them. As soon as the clouds start to look a little bit indigo and it's spitting and there's a little bit of sun, yeah, I am at the window. It's coming. I've got to
okay,
find
I'm
it.
not the only. That's
No
okay.
way. 100% not. And it's lovely because I have like friends and family. They send me pictures of rainbows when they see them, and yeah. So yeah,
Because
she's my
I do
little
believe that
rainbow.
it is a sign. Yeah, I believe that there's signs, and I believe robins would be another sign.
Yeah.
I don't. I'm assuming you use like you'd have like obviously robins, and I was in the forest. There's a forest near my house, and I went, and I always had this fear. I was always terrified of butterflies, always petrified of them. Like they're fabulous, delicate little creatures, but just the way they flutter, I was
Yeah.
like, oh, get away from me. And I'm the same with birds. The way a bird would fly, I'm terrified. But I will make allowances for a little robin and I'll make allowances for butterflies. And I was in the forest 2 weeks ago and I had been doing kind of like there's a thing in Ireland called the 100 Days of Walking, and it's always done from the 1st of January for mental health. And of course, this charity that the Féileacáin charity, they will do it, but they do it for the babies. So like every day is a different baby, and there's no pressure on you, but you can go out and you can say, today I'm walking for Tadhg, or today I'm remembering Isabella, and they've lay out kind of like 100 days worth of calendars. So I knew on this particular day who I was walking for, and I was in my head kind of remembering them. And I said, when I get to the lake, I'm going to sit down and have a cup of coffee. And I'm sitting there, and I saw something at my foot, but I thought it was like a mouse or something. And next minute, a little robin appeared on the bench beside me. So I was chatting away, and again, I'm going, if anyone's walking in the forest, they'll think I'm nuts because I'm talking to the birds. And then he hopped up behind me.
Mm.
And then he kind of came over the other side. And of course, I'm videoing on the phone and, kind of still chatting away. And then he landed on my lap and he sat on my knee for a good 3 or 4 minutes. He only actually got
Wow.
off my knee because I was starting to get a bit like, okay, you're freaking me out now. You're a bit too close to me. And if you fly, I'm just afraid I'll kind of go, oh, and like hurt you if I hit you or something. But he literally sat there. Um, And now I know obviously it's a forest and there's probably like 100 robins in the forest, but when I did get up to leave, I kind of went down to the bridge and I went to text pictures like to my husband of this robin and kind of whatever. And whatever way I looked, he was sitting right in front of me on the bridge. And again, he was like singing away, and of course the camera's out again. And I was like,
Wow.
going, it's probably a different robin, but I was like, going, I just felt it was, I was like, that was Tadhg. And he walked in the whole forest with me and he was singing
Mm-hmm.
away to me. And as I say, like, it doesn't do me any harm to believe this.
No.
Um, so it makes me feel good. So I'm going to believe it. And if people think I'm nuts, so be it. I'm nuts. Like,
Yeah. I mean, I just think that there's a 7-year-old ghost walking around next to me, so people think I'm nuts too. That's fine. I don't know. I think when you you have to believe in something. You have to you have to feel the signs when your child dies, when your baby dies, because it can't be it. That can't be it.
no, no.
She has to be waiting for me somewhere. She has to be waiting for me
And I
because
said it as, yeah, I was gonna say, I said as kind of morbid as this sounds, and obviously I've no intentions of, you know, dying hopefully anytime soon, and I don't want to die soon. Like I have more of my life here to live.
hmm
But I've always said that when my time comes, there's a lot of people like who would be like, you know, they're afraid of death because, you know, you don't know if there's anything or the unknown. But I've always said when my time comes, I will be like, you know, what's his name? Usain Bolt. I'll be
yeah,
gone,
I'll be out here.
running to those pearly gates,
Yeah,
sprinting as
yeah,
fast as I can, just to literally get hold of him
yeah.
and just never let him go.
And
That's it.
I wonder when
I'm
I
sure
am,
it's like massive.
I wonder when I am that close to holding her again, whether she will be a woman or a baby. I wonder
Yeah,
what my brain will, like, who's waiting for me. Am I then going to have that
yeah,
time with her as a baby, or will I have her as a, yeah, as a, hopefully a woman, not a teenager, you know, like you say, I agree with you.
oh
It's
God,
not,
no.
I don't,
You don't want
no,
scruffy teenagers.
no, I don't want to be morbid either, but yeah, she is there waiting for me, and I'm very happy. I have a lovely life. I have a lovely partner, and I love my job and all my family, and yeah. So no, I'm not ready to go,
Yeah,
but she is there when
no. But when
yeah,
the time comes, you'll be
uh-huh,
like, yeah, I'm happy
yeah,
to check out now.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
lovely. Thank you so much for
Mm.
talking about Tadhg.
Oh, I enjoy talking because I love talking. It sounds wrong saying I love talking about all these babies, but it does warm my heart because I know what it's like to have that fear that they'll be forgotten
hmm
or that they're not recognized. I would have most of my family don't recognize Tig
Okay.
as having existed. They don't understand why, after 5 years, I would still grieve the way I grieve.
hmm
It's like in their head, they're going, but you didn't know him, so why are you so sad? Um, so it's very important for me to talk about him and be like, well, no, I did have a child and he did exist, and you know, I have a son.
Yeah.
He's just not physically with me, but I like anyone that will ask me how many children do you have, I'll always include him because I'm like, well, I have him, and I don't care if you feel awkward that I've mentioned my dead child. I'm not going to not talk about him or not
No.
acknowledge him.
Yeah, me too. Do you have children? I say, oh, yes, I had a daughter, but unfortunately she passed away. Or depending on what kind of mood I'm in, I say, oh, yeah, she's dead. Or, you know, because I've learned, I used to feel really guilty if I didn't talk about her. So, what's really lovely about the podcast is I can talk about her, and the people that want to listen will.
Yeah,
And that's fine. And the people that think, oh, she talks about a dead baby all the fucking time, they then don't listen. It's fine. It's not for you. You know, the Facebook page I have is, you know, a handful of members, but they're the people that want to be here
yeah,
with us and talking about their babies, or, you know, just reading about Isabella and all the other babies. So yeah. Um and then obviously it just, oh, some people are just like, don't know what to say. Oh my god, what did she say? But yeah, so what I meant to say was I used to feel guilty if I didn't speak about her, and I would have met this person for the first time and told them the whole story, and then maybe not got on with the person very well, and I wish I hadn't told them
yeah,
about her, or they would ask a question that I thought was insensitive, or, you know, or something like that. So obviously now I've learned, yeah, I know how I'm going to tell that person that she's
yeah,
not here anymore. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It
kind of.
is. Yeah, no, because I my husband doesn't talk about Tig. Not that he doesn't talk about him. Like he could very easily kind of meet people and never mention that he has a son.
hmm
Whereas and I don't know whether it was, I'm not saying that, you know, kind of before the inquest, there was very much a huge fight in me that I had to do this. I had to kind of, you know, make sure he was acknowledged and he was out there. Um, I think since the inquest, I don't know whether it's just me that I'm coming into a different, I hate using the word like a journey and all that stuff, but I'm coming into a different part of my journey now. So things are changing in how I'm grieving. But I always had to nearly bring him into every conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not as much anymore, which is good. But as you say, like if somebody will ask me, I will always include. There's one person in work that did ask me at Christmas time how many children I had, and I didn't include him. Um, and I still feel guilty that I didn't, but obviously I feel really awkward that I'm not going to run back to this guy's office and go, oh, by the way, do you remember that conversation 2 months ago?
I
I
lied. I
actually,
lied to you. Yeah.
so I'm like, maybe like if it comes up again or something comes up about children, I'll say it then. But it was kind of in the moment. I was like, oh no, I didn't feel right in saying like, whatever. It was not that it wasn't appropriate, but it was just the conversation didn't call for me to mention him. Like so,
Yes.
but like that, I'll feel guilty if I don't, and be like, oh God, oh God, oh God, I need to say it. I need to
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And now
we
I
have
think
been.
if I say, sometimes I just say, oh no, I don't have any children, or Rob and I don't have any children. Um, However, as bizarre as this might sound, and I talk about it all the time, is Rob is Isabella's stepdad, but he never met her. It's He just took on this role without me even asking him. Maybe because I talk about her all the time, so he kind of had to. But
Oh, but
you know, um, he does some lovely. I say that I feel like she's just around me all the time. Um, I have a pair of motorbike boots that Rob bought me, and he asked me what size I was. He said, "I'm going to buy all your gear, because I'm buying my new motorbike and stuff like that. So let me know what it is you want." Um, and the pair of motorbike boots that he bought me were called Isabella. Like just the name of the boot was Isabella, and it's just little things like that. It's just so lovely, and her middle name is Eden. So if I see Eden written anywhere, I'm just like, oh, it's a sign. Oh, she's here, and we've been to the Eden Project so many times. I actually have an Eden Project T-shirt underneath this, but I was cold, so I put my sweatshirt on. Um,
oh, you can see I'm wearing rainbows again here.
ah, ah,
I
I want to see.
got this. This
Try.
actually came out of this Tesco's, and it came out for frontline workers in support of them.
Yeah,
And this is on it. Storms don't last forever,
yeah. I've got,
so that's
so
why I bought it.
mine just says Eden Project, and then
Oh,
the biomes are there.
the little
Oh,
things we do to keep them,
yeah.
keep them.
Absolutely. I could talk about her
No,
forever. And I am so glad that we got to do this, because I'll be honest, I was a little bit nervous because I speak to people on Zoom all day, every day. But, it's been really nice to talk about our babies, definitely, to talk about
yeah,
Isabella and Tig. Oh, I've loved every minute of it. And even when it might seem a little bit weird to somebody that isn't in 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 any of this, or hasn't experienced it, or doesn't know anybody, when you were talking about your labor, I was still smiling, because it was still how he came into the world. It's his story, and it
mm,
make it people can think what they want, but I want to hear the stories, and it makes me so happy. And so it's not awkwardness sitting here thinking, oh, I'm just going to smile. It's genuine, like, oh, it's so lovely
yeah.
to talk about him. It really was.
No, and I'm the exact same. Like I am on obviously different kind of pages or whatever, and Instagrams and all that sort of stuff. Um, and I love, not I'm not saying, I suppose prior to all of this, when you live in that innocent bubble where you don't realize that this happens in the world.
Hmm.
You hear of, that babies don't survive and whatnot, but you're like, oh, that's never going to happen to me. So I can just, turn the channel off and flick. So I suppose prior to all of this, I wouldn't have necessarily, even looked at, say, pictures or whatever.
Hmm.
But since then, like I'll see pictures and I'll just be like, oh my God, that child is just so gorgeous. And they're like, and regardless of even say like the gestation of the baby, like I never see like a dead baby, if this makes sense. It's always, I'll just see like a beautiful baby.
Yeah, me too.
Whereas I know I said like my family don't talk to me. My sister refuses to put a photograph of Tadhg in her house.
Okay.
Because he's a dead baby.
Yeah.
And that hurts me an awful lot because I'm going, it's your nephew. But it was very hurtful to me that she wouldn't put a photograph of him up. And as I said to the husband, like everything about him was perfect,
Yeah. Does she talk about him though, but just doesn't want the picture of him?
No, she actually doesn't talk to me at all. She stopped talking to me a year after his death because I think it was at the time. Well, I did ask her. We were told we've been fighting with the hospital for 5 years to get answers as to why he died, and we were told, kind of probably about a year, maybe 2 years, coming up to his 2-year birthday. We were told, okay, now this is a date you've been given to have your inquest, and I asked her would she attend the inquest with me as just hold my hand basically, and she told me it was too difficult for her to go. Which I understand, but at the time I was going, well, if it's difficult for you, can you imagine how it is for me? Because this is my life. So it was just, as I say, like she doesn't acknowledge him and hasn't really at all from, like, she kind of gave me a year and then that was it. It was like, okay, you're done now. And obviously doesn't kind of show, wouldn't have like the photographs or anything like that. So I think in her mind it was a case of, you've grieved for a year, now you need to turn around and stop. And, like, obviously there's the thing of like, focus on what you have and stuff. And you're kind of going, yeah, I am focused on what I have, but doesn't mean that I can't focus on what I don't have either. And there's nothing wrong with focusing on that. And then obviously for me, there was a huge thing because we knew, we were told when Tadhg passed away, initially we were told by the doctors that he had a genetic condition.
Okay.
And that it was the rarest upon rarest of conditions. You've more chance of winning the Euro Millions lotto than you have of actually getting this condition. It was very much given to us with a, waving a piece of paper, like, oh, this is what caused his death. We did nothing wrong. Brilliant. Okay. We're off the hook. And I remember reading it and I kind of was thinking to myself going, I'm not really buying it, but, we'll see. I came home, I think for like 24 hours, I was like, yeah, maybe the doctor's right. Like they did tell us like, oh, you're better off, he's dead, because, he would have had no quality of life. You would have had to spend all your time up in the specialist, the hospital in Dublin. So, like it wouldn't have been fair and everything. And I was like, yeah, maybe they're right. And I did whatever research I could on the internet, found a couple of articles stating kind of like what are the characteristics of this this condition, and kind of.
So obviously you can talk about that if you want, because I know that I don't know Tadhg's cause of death. Sorry, yeah. That doesn't sound very. That wasn't worded very nicely. But also I've had people on here where sort of like investigations and inquests have been going on, and so that's as far as we've got. We've not spoken about it, and one of the ladies, she had to speak to her lawyer, had to actually watch our episode uncut the whole way through to see if there was stuff that they should or shouldn't talk about. But yeah, of course, if you want to talk about that, like you can.
I'm allowed to know purely because we've had our inquest. Okay. So anything that is said and in relation to say like his cause of death and the findings of the inquest, they're public knowledge. Okay. And anyway, then you can request them off the coroner, and they're part of public record. So the condition we were told was called trisomy 4 mosaicism, which meant that only some of his cells had 3 of the 4th chromosome, if any of that makes sense to you. So
Okay.
when I looked up this condition, like there was a heart defect was, you know, kind of for a congenital heart defect is one of the major kind of internal conditions. And then externally, you'd have like your ears would be quite low down. You might have kind of a very pronounced forehead, so more like a caveman type thing. You could have a cleft jaw and a cleft palate, and you'd have like missing fingers, like you mightn't have a thumb. To look at a child with this condition, you know, you'd know that, okay, right, there's something disabled about that child.
Yeah.
Whereas to us, Tadhg was perfect. Like he'd 10 fingers, 10 toes. And like I said to the husband, he's perfect outside. So my actual words, and excuse my language here, but my actual words were, unless he was fucked inside completely, he did not have this condition.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to wait. He passed away or he was born in the June, and it would have been the November before we actually got the autopsy report. And when the autopsy report came out, it was only given as a kind of not say a temporary report. I don't know what the word is, because they had the pathologist had wanted to just get a report from the geneticist to say yes, he did have this condition. So, but he had put down his cause of death was hypoxia due to placental failure. Okay. So he didn't believe that the genetic condition had caused any of his had caused his death at all. Like, and like I got the autopsy report. I read it from cover to cover and Googled all the words that I didn't understand, which was obviously 90% of the report, with the medical terminology. Yeah. But I kept saying to the husband, I was like, and he did not have this. I'm not being, you know, a mother who's like, oh, my child is perfect. You know, I'm going, yes, he's perfect. But I was like, he didn't have this. He had no characteristics of it. And again, we kept fighting them. And they still insisted. We went to see a geneticist in Dublin who I believe was quite a rude woman. She told us, you know, you're better off, your son is dead. She told me he had this condition. And when I tried to question her as to, she kept telling me like, nobody's alive with this condition. And if he was born alive with it, he would have been the first person in the entire world to be born alive with this condition because there was nobody with it. And I looked at her and I said, but there's a case study that was done in 2016, I think, where there was 4 people who are alive with this condition. And I'm assuming they're still alive because there's nothing to follow up and say they'd passed away. And they all had more than the percentage. They reckon he had 20% of this. And these people all would, or these other children would have all had kind of like 40 and 50% of it, and clearly showed signs of it, like, but she just glossed over it, like, you know, kind of, and didn't answer at all and just kept saying, you know, you're better off. And so I left the meeting fairly shortly after that, and continued to sit at home. I'm not saying driving myself mad, but it was very much like I was saying the same thing. And like a broken record, for 5 years, I just kept saying the same thing over and over again. So eventually, we actually had gotten a date for our inquest in March 2020. And this particular geneticist was booked to come along and to give her evidence and everything. And on the morning, at the last minute, she just said, no, I'm not coming. And so everything was cancelled, put on hold for supposedly a month. But then COVID decided to drop, and everything was put on hold for 2 years. So last November, we finally got to court, and I had to get up and give my evidence again. And this geneticist came and she gave her evidence via a video call. And we had obviously done our own research and we had our own reports to be able to say to her, well, there's this person's alive and there's this research, you know, kind of, if she was going to claim that, you know, nobody lives with this and this is a death sentence. And immediately kind of off the bat, she just came out and said that research had come to her attention where people are alive with this condition. And it's not the death sentence that she led us to believe it was all those years previously. And she also went on further to actually say that there could be many people alive with the condition who don't show any characteristics, and who aren't tested for it because, there's no reason to test. They might be, say, just developmentally a bit slower. So, they could be on the spectrum, or they could just have, intellectual disabilities. But you'd never in a million years think, oh, they have a genetic condition. You'd just think to yourself, oh, well, they're just a little bit, intellectually disabled and they just need a little bit more.
Like you say, on the spectrum or something.
Yeah. And as she said it, unless they're actually tested for this condition, they'll go completely undiagnosed, but they'll live a happy and relatively normal life, and hopefully a long life. Which was huge for us, because the fact that he'd no characteristics of this, we thought, okay, if anything, her only argument was that he could have had developmental delays, and I'm going, that wouldn't have bothered me at all. I would gladly take a child with developmental delays than what I have. So that was obviously huge for us, and it immediately took genetics off the table as a cause of death. It couldn't have been ruled as a cause of death. So then it was down to my level of care and the doctors themselves, and how I had gone in with reduced movements. I had a potential problem diagnosed with the placenta when I had the reduced movements. And I suppose the plan of care that was put in place was originally for me to have obviously the scan, and 2 weeks later to have another, say, big scan to obviously check that the placenta was doing its job and that the baby was growing. But that second scan was never done and never took place. And because of that, the coroner ruled that his cause of death was hypoxia due to placental failure. And she also said that she had no other choice but to rule that it was a medical misadventure. So I don't know whether not saying, I don't mean this to say that you don't know what that is or anything, but over here in the courts, when it's an inquest, your options for the coroner's ruling are medical misadventure, medical negligence, and then there's obviously murder, suicide, accidental death, or natural causes. They're kind of the main ones. So we were obviously, or I think you can do a narrative death, which would be just, for us, a narrative death would have been, hypoxia due to placental failure, where there's nothing, there is no level of blame in any way. So regardless of what, with it being a medical misadventure, it's not like the hospital is to blame. It's literally just, it's medical misadventure and nobody is to blame for it. But she turned around and said that the definition of medical misadventure is, I have to get this right now in my head. Oh, I know it, normally I know it like this.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
An intentional action that results in an unintentional consequence. So they intentionally failed me in my care. They intentionally failed to follow the plan that was put in place for me, which resulted in the unintentional consequence being Tadhg's death. And when she said, I have a recording of it, when she said it, it was like, finally, somebody believed me. Somebody listened to me and said, you were right all along. You've been told so many times that there was nothing we could do. You're better off, he's dead. And I just kept saying no. He should be here. He should be here. And this is the reason why he wasn't here. I said it in the hospital so many times, you didn't give me a second growth scan. If you gave me the second scan, you would have seen. And actually, he was 2.5 kilos at 34 weeks. And by the time he was born, it was literally a day or so shy of 38 weeks. He should have been roughly 3.5 kilos. They say roughly 1,000 grams, kind of every 250 grams a week is the kind of rough weight that they would gain at that stage towards the end of pregnancy. And instead, in the 4 weeks, he had gained 330 pounds, or 330 grams, sorry. So he had fallen off the scale. He had dropped in the centiles from the 75th centile down to the 25th centile. So he was extremely small for his gestation, and they never picked it up. And had they have done a scan, they would. The doctor actually admitted on the stand. The consultant said, if I had have scanned her, I would have seen the fall off in growth, and I would have delivered him.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to say, like, it's a victory. Not that there's a victory at all. Because I did, like, I kind of all along I've been saying to people, like, you know, I think once I get the inquest over, I always had this vision that I would be at the, now, not that you stand up when she's given her verdict or anything. It's not like, you know, you stand in court or whatever when you're kind of in jail or whatever. But I just always had this vision that she was going to go to give her verdict, and she would literally say it in whatever way she'd say, where like she agrees with me, and I would collapse dramatically, like. And while that didn't happen, like, I did obviously break down crying and thought to myself, like, oh my God, like, finally somebody has believed me. And like, it doesn't bother this woman whether she believes me or not, because she has nothing to gain and she's nothing to lose. She's completely unbiased in her opinion here. And I kind of thought, I'll feel better and I'll be able to, you know, grieve and, you know, move forward. And while in one hand I have done that, if I think about it, there's the other side of me that's going, like, when you say, like, oh, my child should be here, or, you know, if you've lost, say, a mom or a granny or something, you're like, oh, they should be here, you know, to see all this. There is that wishful thinking of, like, you know, yes, my child should be here, but I'm saying, like, you know, my child should be here, but he's not, because you didn't listen to me and you didn't do that scan. And that's the only reason why he's not here. So it is very much now having to actually really accept it.
Yeah.
It's very hard. And I think that's why, obviously, I suppose the last couple of weeks, not saying I put it out of my head, but I'm just in that little, kind of going into this defensive bubble where I'm like, you know, he's there and I look at the photographs of him every day, but it's like as if I'm looking at someone else's photograph, or I distance myself from it, because I just don't want to have to really sit and think and live in that moment that that's the reason why he's not here.
Yeah. I'm so sorry.
And it's okay, because it's not your fault.
I know, but
I know.
you're going to start grieving again, do you think?
Yeah. Because I think, as well as that, like, again, I don't know what the legal side of things is like in England, but over here you've 2 years to lodge, say, your legal, you know, I want to basically issue legal proceedings and do investigations and, you know, whatever the case may be, in order to find out a cause of death. You have to do that you have to lodge your interest in that within 2 years. So even though it took us 5 years to get an answer, we had to, you know, start that process very quickly after his death. So it meant that I wasn't really able to grieve, because
you're preoccupied.
Yeah. Like I said to the husband, you're going to laugh at me and think I am completely nuts. I'm a huge Charlie Hunnam fan. I don't know whether you know who Charlie Hunnam is. He's English. He's a British actor. And he would have been in Sons of Anarchy.
Oh, I've never watched, even though we're into motorbikes, we've actually never seen it.
You need to watch it.
Okay. What's his name? Sorry?
Charlie Hunnam.
Okay.
Google him.
I'm going to Google him.
But he was in the movie King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. That was the remake by Guy Ritchie. And I, of course, watched it and had it on, like, repeat. And then, of course, I started listening to the soundtrack. So every time I put the soundtrack on, I would obviously remember the scenes in the movie. And, like, obviously it's one of these movies where, you know, he's down and he fights back and, oh, this is brilliant. And I would always have like the songs. I'd be, I might be out walking or I might be in the gym, and these were my songs to like get the fire in my belly going for when I was going to court and I was going to fight all these doctors and fight the system. And because of all of that, like I was never able to grieve. I had to be on my A game. I had to know my story inside out and front. That because obviously when I was on the stand, the coroner is allowed to ask me questions. My solicitor obviously can ask me questions, but also the solicitor for the hospital asks me questions. And they can be quite hard. Like the solicitor from the hospital was quite tough. Like the first time I had my inquest, like the first inquest, he kept saying stuff to me, and I was kind of looking at him going, "No, that didn't happen." And he just kept repeating it over and over again. And you're like trying to not lose, your composure. And while I might act blind and curse outside in my normal life, in court I'd be very respectful. So it is quite hard that they're trying to make a liar out of you and make you think that this is your fault. The hospital did nothing wrong, and well, you should have gone to the hospital earlier if you were in labour, and if you didn't think you were having movement, it was you should have gone to the hospital, and you're kind of going, well, maybe I should have, but they should have noticed as well. Like they're the doctors, not me. So I would have had all this music to fight, and now that there's no court, even now when I listen to the music, it kind of has a completely different meaning because now I'm allowed to actually breathe. I no longer have anything to fight for. And I think that's where I'm not saying I'm having difficulty with the whole thing. It's just, I said to the husband, I said, I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't know the word to describe what I'm feeling. There's some days where I'll feel happy or content. And then there's other days when I'm in a bubble and I just don't want to get out of that bubble.
Yeah, you have been preoccupied, like researching and fighting for him, and you're his mum and you knew what was right. I've known this whole time that I'm right, and it's happened, and it's like, oh, well, what do I do now? Like, I have to think about him, I have to grieve for him, and just maybe now he needs the time, just him, not what happened around him. Yeah, just him, just Tadhg, just him.
Yeah, that's what it is. Like it's just, as you say, it's just him, and it's just to even remember like whatever I can remember in the pregnancy. And it's not that I blocked it out, but it was always, Tadhg in the hospital. So the pregnancy was always, the hospital darkness was in the background. Whereas now I'm going, well, I might be able to start remembering the different things that would have happened. Now it could be getting sick or something like that, but just like little things because I know I would have always had this thing where you'd kind of think to yourself, oh, I don't feel you moving, and I don't really feel very pregnant at the start. But then like the next day I would have had my head down the toilet and was like, okay, yeah, no, I'm still pregnant.
Yeah.
He's still there, he's fine. It's like, that's fine. You could have shown me another way, but it's okay. So like it's having to try and focus on those things and remember all those things, like and then as you say with Isabella, like you celebrate her life as you would, and you celebrate her birthday. So like we try and do that, like we'll celebrate his birthday because it falls on a bank holiday. We always try and go away for it. Now with COVID we haven't, but we're hoping to this year like go and do like a bit of a camping trip for his birthday, down to my husband's big into motorbikes, so we're going to go down to a motorbike festival in the south of Ireland. So
very cool. Yeah. Oh yeah, I like to go away for Isabella's birthday. So yeah, we like to go camping too. So we went to the Lake District for her birthday last year. It was a beautiful rainbow, and I actually had my contract came through for my new position on her birthday. So all my paperwork have her birthday.
Oh no!
And whereas before that would have been, I say before, I mean, I wouldn't have been applying for new jobs back then, but still. Whereas I just love that now. That's like her little stamp on it to say, yeah,
well done, Mammy.
Deserved this. Yeah, definitely. I So, yeah. Oh, lovely.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for letting me tell his story.
You're welcome.
And share it with Isabel.
Thank you so much for finding and continuing to listen to the Baby Loss podcast. If you would like to be a guest on my podcast and share your baby story, or if you would like your Baby Loss charity featured, then please get in touch by searching Baby Loss Podcast on your podcast app, Facebook, Instagram and my YouTube channel. If you have been affected by today's episode, then please reach out. SANDS can be reached via their website sands.org.uk, spelt SANDS, their Facebook page and their helpline on 0808 164 3332. Oscar's Wish Foundation is a charity offering bereavement support to families in Sussex and throughout the UK. They can be found on Facebook. If you live in Gloucestershire, you can contact Footsteps Counselling and Care by visiting their website, Facebook page, or contacting their helpline on 01452 308 618. If you require immediate support, you can call the Samaritans 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for free on 116 123. Thank you for listening and see you next time.